has been granted. Surely not the way any of us envisioned or hoped for, but here we are. I'm John Hayes, the Titus Chair for Franchise Leadership at Palm Beach Atlantic University in West Palm Beach, Florida, home of the Titus Center for Franchising. And as we continue to plow through these turbulent times, we're grateful for the many people in the franchise community who are reaching out to make a difference. And we do that particularly at the Titus Center through these Zoom conferences. You've probably heard the message that you can have everything in life you want. If I can get that. Let me get the slides. You should be able to see the slide presentation. And if you're on with us, please, I can't keep up. Cheryl, maybe you can mute people who come on because we're picking up background noise. So you probably heard the message, you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. It's the late Zig Ziglar's paraphrase of the golden rule. And there's no better time than now when we're forced to slow down, to reach out and find out what others need, and then to share our thoughts and ideas. And no one has all the answers, but as a franchise community, historically, we've always been pretty good at developing systems for the future. And as we continue to produce these Zoom franchise conferences, we'll post them on our conferences page at tituscenterforfranchising.com. So click on tituscenterforfranchising.com, click on the conferences page, and you'll find our previous programs there as well. Today, we're looking at the future for the franchise food industry. What's it going to look like next week, next month, next year? What's different? How do we need to adjust? How do we help each other succeed? And what can we do right now to make it easier for franchisors and franchisees to survive in this industry? Our speakers today don't profess to have all of the answers, but they are at the forefront of the food industry, and each one is helping their franchise systems make hourly adjustments that ultimately will assure the future prosperity of their brands. We're going to hear from Czech Mabuk, President and COO of Edible Arrangements, Madison Job, Chief Development Officer at Wingstop and a member of the Titus Center Advisory Board, Craig Ehrlich, President and CEO of Bricks Holdings, which includes Smoothie Factory, Red Mango, Red Brick Pizza, and Super Salad. As we get started, I'd like to remind you, again, to keep your presence muted, particularly if you're on a phone, because we can't control it. Mute your phone, mute your screen to block out the background noise, and use the chat to ask questions. And then later, as we have time for Q&A, you can use the unmute toggle to ask questions or share your ideas. Shout out to my students who are joining us today as part of our course Principles of Franchising at Palm Beach Atlantic University. These students, many of them, some of them looking to graduate next month, many of them earning the concentration in franchising that we offer through the Titus Center. We will record this program and post it, as I mentioned earlier, on the conferences page of tituscenterforfranchising.com. You'll find other Zoom franchise conferences, including our session that we did earlier this week about how to get your piece of the CARES Act. There's also a slide presentation that will help provide guidance to you, particularly franchisees, so that you know what you need to do now to get one of those low-interest government loans. So here we go with the new normal for food franchisors and franchisees. And we're going to begin with Czech from Edible Arrangements. They have some 1,000 locations internationally. Everyone probably knows that Edible Arrangements offers customers the opportunity to send their friends and colleagues and loved ones a fruit bouquet. And traffic into the store has not historically, I'm assuming, been critical because the bouquets are delivered or you can pick them up and take them with you. But given the dire circumstances we're facing across the globe, check. Are people still sending fruit bouquets? And what's Edible doing to help franchisees adjust during these times?
Hey, John, thank you. Thank you for having me, actually, and glad to be sharing a platform with my colleagues, Madison and Craig. You're correct. During moments like this, a pivot is fundamental for most companies. Even if you're in a grocery business where demand is high, you're pivoting because how you fulfill your shelf or satisfy that demand prior to COVID-19 and now would be different. So people think the products we're most known for, which is the edible arrangement itself, is still being purchased. But we added some other components in our business by adding the fruit baskets. These are whole fruits that are delivered to our consumers within 15 miles radius of the stores. And now, most recently, the vegetable boxes, actually. But we added these extra elements to our business simply to add on to, let's call it the queen of our industry for us, which is our fruit arrangement itself.
Check.
John, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, but we couldn't for a while.
Oh, how about now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Let's see if technology is going to be on our side.
Okay.
So with that being said, referring to, I think to your question in terms of what we're doing with what is Edible doing currently, adding on other components to our business, reflecting back to what the consumer needs, which is, whether it's whole fruits and vegetables. These are components of our business which we never delivered solo. And here we are now creating fruit baskets and vegetable baskets that are being delivered to our consumers from each store. So to your original question.
We lost you again, Jack.
The fruit arrangement itself.
There we go. Now we're losing
right?
you. You're coming in and out.
How about now?
Not getting you right now. Yeah.
Is it better, John?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yeah.
All right. So we are, in short, have added some more products to our categories, which are the one I just mentioned, the fruit and vegetable boxes, and still do carry the fruit arrangement. But we've added other items due to times like this in order to respond to what our consumers may need.
And how are your franchisees responding to this? What's happening across your network?
First, I think our network and many other network, including ourselves, you go through different phases, right? The first phase is you're scared. You don't know what's going to happen. And it's a natural component of a natural phase that all of us may face. But post that, we sat back and started looking at how to best respond. What are some of the necessities that we could offer? What do our consumers need? As you answer that question, we're fortunate to have the franchisees put their thoughts together with us and be able to come up with some of these products. So right now, the response that we're getting from our franchisees is not focusing on the unknown, but more or less just act based on the information you get today and responding to what the community which we serve may need. I think the natural.
Go ahead.
I think, John, the natural question or the natural element that people may gravitate towards is what's the new norm? And I say that instead of focusing on the new norm, know what we know today and just respond to what your community needs and via the businesses which we own. And I think that's what the franchise system that I'm fortunate to be part of, that's how they've responded so far.
So what all, Check, are you doing in terms of communicating with your franchisees and assuring them that there's a future? Tell us about how this is a different time for the franchisor in communicating with franchisees particularly.
I will say now more than ever, two-way communication is critical, because absence of that, the mind will be filled with imaginary thoughts or wrong data. So I've actually had the honor to have not only the franchisees on a daily basis. We have these daily calls with several groups of franchisees where each one of them gets to ask a question. We try to do 30, 40 of them a day. And in each one of those, had the opportunity to even have the founder of the brand join us. And what it does, there's two-way communication. I think what it does is ensure that we continue to be aligned of what to do, what have we heard, and how do we best utilize the data that we've received and transform that data more or less into insight, which is actionable. So I say that two-way communication has always been a critical component in franchise business, but now more than ever, it's actually fundamental to have it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how about the situation with customers? How are they responding? Is it's fortunately not Valentine's Day, but Mother's Day is coming up. Easter is coming up. So how are these holidays going to impact what franchisees are doing? And tell us more about what they are doing to keep in touch with their customers and how you're helping them do that.
No, absolutely. So, one, we have a platform in our business, unlike many others. Each transaction has two components, like two important individuals. You have the purchaser and the recipient in most cases. And our products are emotional currency. You have the purchaser, whether it's Mother's Day or Father's Day or any other holiday, or simply just a birthday, is expressing their emotion using our product. The reason why I tend to call our product an emotional currency. I mean, you have franchisees that are already going into their system and contacting those who've used their product before, used the platform before, and ensuring that they know we're here and that they're there within that community to serve their loved ones as these holidays are coming up. But more or less, even today, as we deal with this so-called new norm. So the platform that we have, I think what gives us the more or less a level of an increase in chances of executing these upcoming holidays flawlessly is that in the franchise community, you have a franchisee in our case who lives in that community, who knows that community better than anyone. And we have the technological platform that allows them to see the consumer in each transaction and the purchaser in each transaction. And they're utilizing those to emotionally connect with them first.
All right, good. I want to bring Madison Job into the mix as well. Madison and I have been friends for many, many years, during which time he has worked with several different food concepts, and always an interesting conversation with Madison, and always very close to franchisees. Currently handling the development of franchising at Wingstop with 1,400 locations system-wide. And in some ways, I think, Madison, this is correct, Wingstop franchisees are a little better prepared for what's happening because you've always been a takeaway or a delivery concept. The in-dining is not, it's possible at Wingstops, maybe all of them, tell us about that. Not currently possible, of course, but in-restaurant dining wasn't as critical to your business, so maybe that's not hitting the franchisees so hard, but nonetheless, what are sales like and what's the attitude among franchisees? And so tell us, Madison, what's happening in your network?
Thank you, John. Clearly, you are correct that we are better positioned than some people in our business are, because we had grown to pre this crisis about 80% of our sales being off-premise, driven through a variety of platforms, but both obviously still the old style, if you will, call in, but our digital footprint had achieved over 40% as far as the sales mix. And then we just completed in January, actually, of this year, rolling out completely system-wide in the US, third-party delivery. So we're clearly better positioned than many people in the industry. So it has required us to make some changes, of course. You mentioned closing our dining rooms, which we did about 3 weeks ago now. Before it was actually required in jurisdictions, we made the decision to close our dining rooms for dine-in business. And of course, over time, as regulations have changed, we've continued to evolve in ensuring that we don't have too many people crowding in our stores. You go to a busy Wingstop that's doing a lot of pickup business, you can still have a lot of people in one place. So we've certainly continually reminded our franchisees of what the regulations are. We've been very quick to communicate on a daily basis with them as regulations have changed. We've also provided things, planograms, showing them how to have people that are queuing in line and not to have more than a certain number of people, depending on the size of their facility and such. So ours has really been, what changes do we need to make to continue business as usual as best we can? And so we've probably had less to do than many of my peers in the industry that have had to pivot very quickly to delivery if they didn't have it, to maybe the proper takeout packaging. And this is not a time that one, of course, needs to be sourcing takeout packaging. If you did not have approved and ample supplies within your supply chain, it's not a time that you can go out and necessarily source new products that you've never used before. So, yeah. So there clearly are some things around that, but I think our franchisees as a group have been very engaged in the business, and we've been fortunate to have very few locations that have actually had to close. There are a few for a variety of reasons that are based on shopping malls or on college campuses that are no longer open. But for the most part, the major adjustments for us have just been around the dine-in business, as well as all of the other requirements for hours of operations in some places have been shortened, social distancing, as I mentioned, handling queue lines, and generally interacting, with our guests that still want our product.
Yeah. So you oversee development for Wingstop, Madison. Some franchisors have just stopped development. They're not selling franchises currently, or they're not doing discovery days. They're not. Leads are sort of on hold. What are you doing at Wingstop?
Well, there's a couple of parts to that, John. Number one, just from the organic leads that we get through our website, those continue to flow in. I mean, there are some people obviously sitting at home that have a lot more time to research things. Of course, our ideal candidate at Wingstop is a multi-unit and concept restaurant operator. So as far as new prospects there, clearly if they're multi-concept, their focus is really on their day-to-day business as is. Fortunately, we have most of our development comes from our existing franchisees or brand partners, as we call them. So we do not add that many new franchisees over the course of the year by sheer numbers. But we do have some people that we've already qualified. There are always people that are somewhat in the system. And, we're certainly maintaining contact with them and staying close to this. But clearly, it is not normal. We have all of our development team fully engaged. In fact, we onboarded a new team member a week ago Monday. So we are not slowing down that activity at all.
How about, are you providing any incentives for people who buy now or in the next 90 days, or anything different with your sales offer?
We are not. We've done nothing specific around that today.
And then how about, are your franchisees familiar with the CARES Act, do you believe? Have you contacted them about that? Are they in line to queuing up to get their piece of that act so they can get a loan from the government?
Yes, I think certainly we've been doing a couple of things. Number one, for almost 3 weeks now, the first thing we did was internally form a task force around this that is cross-functional across all departments. And we began communicating with our Franchise Advisory Council first, and we've maintained that we communicate with the Franchise Advisory Council almost on a daily basis. And then we have been updating daily in communications to our franchisees every morning. Anything to do around new regulations, and as things have changed, obviously, as the CARES Act was passed, we worked very closely with our preferred lenders, many of which had already had developed microsites to take pre-applications, if you will, before the final guidance, or at least I guess I should rephrase that. The initial guidance came out this week, and so all of the links to not only our preferred lenders, but everything directly through the SBA and the application process we have out there. And yes, we have connected our folks very well. And we started this week having a system-wide webinar as well with some of the CEO and a couple of other senior leaders in the company. So we've communicated literally 7 days a week for almost 4 weeks now with all of our franchisees around the globe. Obviously, some of the process of this has taken on a different phased approach in Asia Pacific and in the Middle East, and then now in Western Europe. So we're communicating with our franchisees around the globe, but obviously the messaging is somewhat different in different parts of the world.
Okay, good. And stay with us, Madison. I want to come back to you and check as well. I know you're with us. Let's bring in Craig Ehrlich. You sent me a slide, Craig, and I'm going to bring that up and have it shared. Yeah, there we go. Craig's with Bricks Holdings. Includes several concepts. There are 110 locations of Red Mango, 26 smoothie factories, 16 red brick pizza outlets, and 6 super salads. Craig, welcome, and talk to us about what will we have learned when this is all over? How's it going to be different for a food franchisor than what it's been for the last 25 years?
Hi, John. Thank you for having me.
You there, Craig?
Yes.
Oh, can't hear you. I can kind of hear you. You might be on mute.
No.
Okay, there you are. Try it again.
You got me? Can you hear me?
Not getting your sound.
We got it. It's low.
Okay, there you are.
Okay.
That's better, Craig.
Better?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Thank you, John. I think that's a great question. So a few parts to that answer. I think the new norm for franchisors is, we need to learn to throw out the calendar sometimes. As franchisors and brand leaders, we work through calendars throughout the year. We plan our marketing campaigns, our launches. Certainly COVID-19 has changed all that. We've done a lot more audibles on a daily basis as to what the needs of our franchisees are. So I think to Check and Madison's point, we're handling each franchisee as a unique opportunity to their needs. In Red Mango, Smoothie Factory, Red Brick Pizza, and Super Salad, we're in all different venues, whether it's airport shopping centers, enclosed malls, college campuses. So there's certain challenges to each one of those venues. So we've been certainly challenge to help each individual franchisee versus looking at it as a broad stroke message to, across all of our brands. I think, for franchises, from my seat, I think the franchising system is going to gain a lot of credibility through this. And the reason why I think that we're going to gain a lot of credibility is, from my seat, I get to speak to all of our franchisees. I get to speak to franchisees in other systems. I also get to speak to a lot of independent restaurateurs. And I think what's happening now is that I could tell you from my point of view, I'm getting thousands of solicitations from vendors on a daily basis relative to how they can help us cope with COVID-19, whether it's online ordering, POS systems, third-party delivery systems. From the franchising system, we've vetted most of that, right? We've put these processes in place, whereas an independent restaurateur or an independent business owner may not know and may make a decision based on a knee-jerk situation where he's not well informed and may wind up costing down the road. So I think from when this is all over, certainly the way we handle certain situations and to be better prepared, and also, from a system standpoint, being ready for our franchisees to be able to handle those circumstances as well.
Okay. So you wanted to speak to this slide. You can see it, right? I've shared it.
Yes.
Hopefully everybody has it on their screen. So go ahead.
So I think the two things that I like to look at it is there's an offensive approach and a defensive approach. And I think, what we try to do internally through our support system, as well as our franchisees, is to, avoid, when you look at offensive strategies, avoid the broad strokes in communication. So for us, each brand has a different opportunity or challenge. There's marketing opportunities, there's operational opportunities relative to, just even the social distancing policies. So making sure that we communicate, I use the 4 C's: clear, concise, consistent communication. So making sure that we avoid those broad strokes for now, and make sure that we do approach each opportunity. For us, we have the 4 brands, so it's about leveraging what each brand has to offer. So let's exploit that and make sure that we're communicating to the appropriate folks to make sure, reminding ourselves, reminding our franchisees, reminding our customers to what our opportunities are within each brand. The one about, leveraging the loyalty members, this one is near and dear to my heart because those are our most valuable customers, and making sure that everyone is embracing our loyalty members, especially now. We're communicating to them more now than ever. Most of our visits are from our loyal customers, so making sure that we embrace that. And I think it also has a new respect now amongst the community. So once we get on the other side of this, I think it's also going to be another strategy to go after loyalty members. The online ordering and delivery messaging, this is something we've been working on for the past year and a half. We need to stay the course on that. I think, most locations are limited to curbside online ordering and delivery, third-party delivery. So staying on course with messaging related to that. And then also, one thing that we've had a lot of franchisees, and this really wasn't dictated by us necessarily, but staying connected to the community, especially our frontline medical help. We've seen franchisees, donating goods and stopping by the local hospitals and medical staff, and the appreciation. That's really what it means to be getting connected to your community. So that's been really nice to see. It's good messaging. It's also for a good cause. My team and I, we probably attend 3 webinars a day. We try not to go on the same webinars, but we've learned a lot about the CARES Act, the social distancing regulations throughout the country. So making sure that we're staying updated on any policies or regulations related to that, and then communicating to our franchisees. And then really this is important too, because we need to make sure that we're preparing for reopenings and new openings. So there's going to be a ramp up part relative to, I think Chuck talked about a little bit of it with staffing, making sure that as much staff as you can retain, because there's going to be a retraining for those that need to rehire or hire new folks for when we get on the other side of this. So it's really being prepared to get ready for it.
So are you, Craig, continuing to open? Do you have openings going on now? Your franchise development has continued. How is that working?
So we've opened a location right at the start of this. Our development, unfortunately, is taking a little bit of a lag because the locations, there's been in certain states construction pauses. So, where a location, so for instance, in an enclosed mall, they're not allowing construction to take place. So, it's going to delay what normally would have been maybe this month, might delay it as much as 60 days. But I think from new openings and reopenings, just making sure that everyone is ready and not pausing too much, and let's just stay focused, because once this happens, we're now going to have a big window or a small window to open many locations and also support our current franchisees that are looking to reopen their locations.
Yeah. So, and this is a question that Jim Butler has is, what are you seeing as an acceptable drop in revenue from your franchisees' percentages now? And I was just about to say, I would like now to go to each of you responding to at least some of these questions. So, Craig, let's start with you. How about a drop in revenue? What's happening?
Well, 0% is acceptable. I think what we're seeing is normally where online and delivery sales were about 10 to 15% of our business. So if you think about eliminating the dine-in opportunities, there's a significant amount. So where we're seeing across the board, and again, Super Salad is a dine-in restaurant brand. So aside from them, we're seeing anywhere from beyond 50%, to be honest with you, because just because of the surrounding businesses and traffic. So Smoothie Factory relies a lot on gyms and health facilities. With those being shut down, it's a lot more difficult to get traffic to those locations.
Yeah. Foot traffic is not happening much out there.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So Madison, how about Wingstop? What are you seeing as a drop in revenue?
Well, John, as I mentioned before, clearly, we are not being as negatively impacted as a lot of other brands are because of our continued takeout and delivery business. I think what we've looked at rather than broadly is we're looking at specific locations because there are some, as I mentioned earlier, obviously some that had to close based on their situation, but there is others that may be more dependent upon traffic patterns that have now changed. And then there are many other suburban locations, that really haven't been impacted by this as far as a total sales number, just the method and the way we have to deliver it, if you will, to the guest.
Okay.
So ours is more about very specific markets.
Mm-hmm. And Czech, how about at Edible? What do you notice in the drop in revenue?
So we're in the latter bucket. Our business is strictly and has been omni-channel now for 15, 16 years. Our e-commerce business by itself, in most cases, is the majority of sales. And beyond that, we've been in the delivery business for 17, 18 years. So we're fortunate to not see as drastic of a decline. It is as Madison stated. For us, some markets are hit harder than others throughout the United States and in Canada. But overall, it's mild in comparison to what the industry is facing.
Okay.
We've
And
been
Chuck, I wanted
fortunate.
to ask you, I'd asked the others already, what
Yeah.
about franchise development? What are you doing at Edible?
You know, we actually have 8 happening in this month of April. We've been fortunate that all 8 are in markets in which construction has not been halted. But to Craig's point earlier, you know, in certain markets like the state of New York, and even I'm hearing as of today, Florida has been added. Construction is completely halted. In other markets, we still could go forward.
Yeah.
As long as
Let me go to all three of you
keep the
again
distance
on.
of 12 in order to.
Oh, sorry. Your audio seems to fall out, Chuck. But let
Can
me
you
go
hear
to
me?
another. Yeah, I can hear you now. Let me go to
Got it.
another question for all three of you. What are landlords? How are they responding? You all have landlord. Your franchisees are in locations where they have landlords. Probably the majority. I'm sure the majority of your franchisees in all 3 cases. What's happening there? Are landlords cooperating? Are they contacting franchisees? Or are you getting involved and having to help the franchisees? Craig, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's a great question. We've made, for our brands, we've made our real estate representatives available to all of our franchisees to help them work with the landlords. I could tell you early indications from feedback from the landlords is they certainly appreciate the proactive conversation versus the wait and see. You know, I've personally spoken to some landlords where they've said, you know, I hope the rest of my tenants don't expect things to happen. But I can also tell you that I don't see landlords reaching out to tenants saying, you know, don't worry about the rent. I think we have to be proactive, reaching out, talking to the landlords about, you know, what kind of assistance they can get.
Yeah. Okay. Madison, how about with you?
Well, I would say similarly, number one, we have our real estate, each of our regional real estate people engaged with our franchisees. Again, in some cases, maybe a little different than what Craig said. We have seen a couple of cases where some of the larger national landlords have distributed a communication, sometimes very specifically, sometimes in general, that you know, they're working on either a delay is acceptable, or in a couple of cases, you know, they are suspending payments for X amount of days, or in some cases, you know, that might be 60 days. And that'll be, you know, paid back over the next year, or paid back at the end of the term. There's a variety of ways. But the vast majority, clearly, you know, as a landlord, are not reaching out. The one thing that we've done is certainly we have counseled our franchisees, and regardless of their situation, not to just not pay rent. Reach out to your landlord. If you're unable to pay rent, or if there are issues, you know, let's advise them and put them on notice. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be immediately resolved, but just don't stop paying rent. And the same thing, obviously, around their debt service as well. Let's contact your banker if need be. And you know, we're advising. We typically are not a direct party to any of those arrangements, so we're not necessarily getting directly involved, but we are giving recommendations and then dealing with the specific request by each franchisee as it comes in.
Are landlords cooperative in general, and are they? Some of them are looking for more franchisees to put in spaces that they've been building. Have you noticed any movement of extending more incentives?
We have seen some, although frankly, I would say last week up and through and including probably today, is most landlords have been more focused on what are we going to do about April rent payments that are due. But in some cases, particularly the larger landlords, where, you know, the people that are out repping and leasing properties are very different than those that are servicing existing properties. So some of them are being more proactive if it's areas that we've looked at or that we've been working on a letter of intent. They've certainly, for a national chain, you know, they have been coming back and, you know, at least suggesting not necessarily cutting rents, but being more flexible on time for build out or rent commencement dates and you know, that of the like.
And Czech, how about edible arrangements? Are you very involved with landlords? Have you created any special program for rent for your franchisees, helping them understand how to pay, when to pay, what to say to the landlord?
So, you know, we put it all part of the CARES Act. We have a team right now that's communicating with franchisees pretty much via a chat platform, giving them suggestions of what are some of the steps they could take. But to Craig's point earlier, the key thing is to not just wait. There has to be a dialogue, and it must be triggered by the tenant. In some cases, the landlords are small business owners themselves, and others we're fortunate to have larger companies. But the reality of things is, I think a two-way dialogue right now seems to be working, where the landlord and the tenants are finding solutions.
Okay. And Czech, let's continue with this next question. What about employees? They're scared. Some folks who have called, who I've talked to through the Titus Center, some franchisors have said franchisees have been forced to close because employees don't want to come to work. Is that happening in your network?
You know, in a minority of cases, it is happening. John, the fear is a natural component in all of us right now. I think whether you're an employee, employer, vendor, vendee, all are feeling the same element of fear. Mm-hmm. The question is, what are some of the precautions that could be put in place, and how great of a dialogue could exist between that franchisee and his or her employees? Because at the end, that's where a resolution could be brought up from. You know, you could send as many communication and warnings as best as you can. But we've been fortunate that in most cases, a minimal number of employees are impacted, meaning to a point where they can't come to work, or the natural fear has taken them to a point where they can come to work. But the majority of the cases, they still.
Okay. And Madison,
they're more or less focused on keeping their job.
Okay, thank you, Czech. And Madison, are your franchisees, what are they experiencing with employees? Are they laying off employees, or they need to hire?
Well, we have no one that I'm aware of laying off employees. We do have a number of markets, including the 3 markets that we operate directly with company-owned stores in. We need to hire people. We were hiring when we came into this, and we still have open positions. You know, we are seeing some impact, no question about that, on employees. And different markets are different. Part of what we've done with our franchisees, and in turn, you know, given both recommendations and support when needed to our franchisees, are in some markets, as these you know, essential business and other restrictions came in, and in some cases where you know, the orders of shelter in place and others were stronger based on the jurisdiction. You know, we have had employees that just said, no, I can't come to work because I'm not supposed to leave my house. So, you know, we've obviously given them the tools to explain that that is not the case. Again, before some jurisdictions required it, we put out template letters that a franchisee could issue to their employees saying that they're an employee of this location, you know, working X amount of hours, and they're an essential business, you know, in case they were stopped or feared being stopped or something like that. So we tried to be proactive. Lastly, I can tell you what we're doing in our own corporate operated restaurants, and we've again shared this with our franchisees. Some have taken on different, you know, approaches or similar approaches perhaps, but we have done what we're calling appreciation pay. So when a full or part-time, and obviously that pay varies a bit, but rather than being a change in their hourly rate, if they work their shifts as scheduled that week, then we give them an appreciation pay bonus at the end of every week based upon them working their full shifts. And that's been not only effective in getting people to come to work, but it's certainly been appreciated by our team members because there are many people that are not going above and beyond at this time. Of course, we're also monitoring those very closely if someone themselves are sick, or if they have a family member that's sick, or they believe in any form they may have been even exposed, secondhand, if you will. We're not allowing those folks to work, but that has not been the last part has not been a really material factor at all.
And Craig, how about layoffs with some of your employees? Are they, particularly if smoothie sales have been hit hard? What's happening?
Well, Smoothie Factory and Red Mango probably were affected least. I think what we've heard from the franchisees are they're having some challenges with staffing. I think this CARES Act is now going to bring a lot of light come this weekend as to what the plan is go forward. They've been hanging on to my point earlier about trying to retain as much staff as possible so that they can avoid that retraining window. So we've heard some challenges with folks with safety concerns. We've also sent out templates to the franchisees to give to their employees relative to the shelter in place. We've put out social distancing material for the franchisees to use within the store to make, help the conversation with the employees go a little bit easier. And then just reinforce our food safety standards and, in-house housekeeping standards. So all of those things considered, it's certainly been challenging, but I think for those locations that are open and doing okay, not as much.
Yeah. Again, a question for all of you. What's the number one lesson that you've learned through this as a franchisor? What's going to be different going forward because of that lesson? So let's start with Craig. Keep on going.
Well, I think, again, the lesson learned is be ready for those daily audibles, making sure that, the things that, thankfully, we've had a lot of those systems in place. So it's a matter of, putting those plans in place, communicating them a little bit more, obviously making sure that we are ready, even though we do have a calendar for the year, put in some additional blocks of, local or current event opportunities. So, again, out of the end of this, I think it's just a matter of balancing out the communication from the franchisee back to us and also from the franchisor back to the franchisee.
When do you, related to this, and I'm going to ask each of you, when are you projecting that, I don't want to use the word normal because it's the new normal now. When are we going to return to some normalcy among franchise sales and among sales to consumers? Any feelings for that, Craig?
Yeah, so, well, it's interesting because I think Madison spoke about it. A lot of folks are at home now in terms of franchise sales. People that might be furloughed or let go might be thinking about a career change at this point. So franchise sales might accelerate coming out of this within the next 60 to 90 days. I think the returning of normal for business standpoint, I'm thinking, that we're probably 90 days away from any sort of, normal for, any restaurant or these non-essential, essential businesses.
Okay. Madison, how about both of those questions that I have posed?
Sure. I think, John, the takeaways and what have we learned, I think part of it is, again, with Wingstop, and I know you and some other people I see on the call that have recently seen or heard Charlie Morrison, our CEO, speak, and around the things that we strive to do in our culture. But more than ever, number one is transparency. Franchisees, they obviously want to feel good, but they want to know the truth as well. And they want to know what we're doing and how we're helping them. So transparency, and then as we always do, we try to over communicate clarity, and we try and go back and communicate it again. So we're very clear on the messaging. I think even for a big company to be able to pivot, as I think Craig said, but to shift, we try to be entrepreneurial, even though we're, a large publicly traded company. But you have to be able to shift and make decisions daily based upon the changing needs, particularly as they have been over the last several weeks. And, again, for Wingstop, keeping the simple operations that we have, keeping them simple is now more important than ever as we layer on some of the other challenges with the regulations of how we service people. In terms of when do we go back to a more normal time, frankly, I hate to even hazard a guess. I certainly will probably take Craig's 90-day time frame and say it's probably going to be at least that. I think, from a pure consumer-facing side, I think it will probably go back in phases somewhat, if you will, much like the shutdowns came in phases. I think markets will open up in phases as we begin to see the conditions and the sheer numbers decline with the impact on people that are stricken with this. And I think, it will probably be similar time frame, maybe even a little longer before a franchise sales and or development cycle, particularly if you're in a business that, sells brick and mortar locations, right? Because who knows what the appetite for development money around banking and other people will be for new construction. We certainly know what it's like to offer funds now, but what will it be like for new construction going forward, and how available will that be? So that will really determine a lot around the speed at which new development and new sales transpire. I think once the markets, the consumer market returns to a more normal state.
Check. How about at Edible, the number one lesson learned, and when is it going to get better?
Look, I think the number one lesson learned is, I echo what Craig and Madison said. It's going to be transparency. How do you create a more fluid level of communication with the system, and really with also the consumers? But I think from a time frame perspective of this new normalcy, for lack of a better word, I think that the demand is always going to be there. I think that the trend of how to consume will be changed for a long period of time. I think that the mother who's right now is a teacher and who's reflecting back on the moment perhaps that she didn't have time to spend time with her daughter or her son will look back at times and try to indulge in a time like this to uplift her kids' education as best as possible, and may be home a little longer. And even though it may work from home, and companies will start to realize the effectiveness that occurs when you actually have this satellite moment. And as a result of that, the consumer may change for some times to come. And therefore, even when healing occurs, there'll be this fear, in my opinion, of it's still here for some reason or another. So I think that consumers will still indulge and appreciate delivery services for those companies that have it. Consumers will still appreciate and indulge on e-commerce platform. And I think that the future of e-commerce has just been expedited through this journey.
Great. We've got a couple of questions on the chat. Is anyone thinking about changing the size of your units because of this disruption? And along with that, what about a drive-through? Is that more important now than it was before? Madison?
Certainly on the size, we have began, and over the years, the last couple of years, we have diminished the size of our footprint and diminished the number of seats as we continue to grow the off-premise. So I would expect that we'll continue to follow that path. as well as look at more takeout and delivery only locations than what we have traditionally done. Drive-throughs have not been a part of our development to date. That certainly would be something that that we would consider going forward if the technology works for our system, but it would certainly be a change for our system. And clearly a number of the particularly more urban locations that we go to, there have been more and more restrictions over the past number of years on additional drive-through locations. So if there's an opportunity to convert a location with a drive-through as opposed to maybe to building new, it would probably be more attractive to us. But it would be obviously somewhat of a change in our approach to real estate.
And Craig, how about you? Any thoughts about this size of the unit and drive-throughs?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Over the past few years, I think we have focused on reducing the size of the footprint in each location, especially for Red Mango and Smoothie Factory, based on the equipment needed and traffic patterns. I think the drive-throughs, absolutely, especially for those two brands I just mentioned. So when we are looking, in fact, we have a few under construction right now, that our primary real estate searches include drive-throughs from the beginning, and then we go from there. So absolutely, I think it's a convenience. It's something that's needed, depending on what region you're in, depending on weather. I think it certainly helps and expand your customer base. And then, for our brands, we've worked on making our equipment modular so that we can plug and play. We're in a lot of colleges and airports and, tight spaces. So we've made it so modular that we try to fit it into as small of a space, whether it's a 200 square foot kiosk to, a 2,000 square foot inline store.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, we're right up against the time. I want to thank our speakers and thank the folks who participated with us. The Titus Center, based at Palm Beach Atlantic University, we're educating the next franchise generation. We hope you'll communicate with us at TitusCenterForFranchising.com. We have a 40-plus member advisory board. Madison Job has been one of those advisory board members from the very beginning, and we appreciate his input and the input of our other 39-plus advisory board members. Our students earn a concentration in franchising. It's not a major or a minor. It's 9 hours of academics and then a 90-hour internship at a franchise company. We always want speakers. I usually bring about 20 speakers into each of my classes. Now doing that online with the current semester. And our advisory board meets in November. Supposed to have met in April, but we've moved that to November. Dina Dwyer-Owens will be our speaker. We always invite guests to our advisory board meetings. These are usually 70 to 80 people who participate. If you're interested, we'd be happy to include you as our guest in our November meeting. Just send me an email at john_hayes@pba.edu. We will post this program at the conferences page of CenterForFranchising.com. Thank you all for participating, and please stay tuned. We have more conferences coming up. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye now.